Okay, we are live talking about love and monsters. Here, since we talked about the worst episode of Torchwood, we might as well talk about the two episodes everyone considers the worst of Doctor Who. So, let's see if we
Except me,
have.
because I like Love and Monsters.
I have some more positive things to say about this one, though, unlike the other one, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure if these two episodes have that reputation anymore now,
Actually, they still do.
because I know that Edward's not the only person who likes Love and Monsters. I know that there are some people who, like, at least consider that an okay episode.
Mhm.
Fear Her, though, which we will get to next, is almost always on someone's top 10 worst list.
The whole problem with Fear Her, for starters, is it's boring.
Yeah, but we'll get to that. Let's stick to Love and Monsters. I mean, I can see why some people might like this because it's silly. I mean, if you look at it in that way, just a silly way, it's kind
Yeah,
of fun and quirky. But if you try to take anything serious out of it, you're going to have a bad time.
yeah, because we just got done talking about Cyberwoman. We went on for a while about what made Cyberwoman bad, but I don't think we emphasized enough just how much like the grim, dark, edgelordy, overly serious tone of that episode made it so much worse.
Yeah.
Because this episode feels like Cyberwoman in a lot of ways to me,
Mhm.
where it's like I can't tell if it's trying and failing to be sincere or if it was like quote unquote sabotaged and made into kind of a mess on purpose. Has a kind of lighthearted charm to it. There are token moments throughout this episode that I think genuinely work.
I personally still don't like it, but I can understand why some people, because like I said,
Like me.
it has more sillier, fun tone than some of the episodes, like Cyberwoman, who takes itself so serious that you just can't help but just laugh at how bad it fails at it.
Yeah, like Cyberwoman is goofy, but it's just such a downer the whole time.
It's goofy because it's so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got a bit of pathos with the whole Elton's tragic backstory and like the fact that a lot of these characters are dead by the end. I could never see anyone getting angry watching.
I think part of it might have to do with the jarring effect of previous episode before this was the Impossible Planets two-parter. And to go from that to this, it's gonna anger some people.
It is a bit jarring.
Yeah, but it usually happens. I notice with Doctor Who, they'll have like a really good episode, and then they'll have like their worst ever episode right after. I don't know how they plan it, but they keep doing that.
Let's kind of talk about the meat of the episode, and I'll say one of the things that I do like is just the concept. Like, this is the first proper Dr. Light episode, and I like the idea of doing it as like a vlog as the framing device. I feel like the presentation is a bit off though, because like the point of doing sort of like a vlog or video record as your framing device is so that once you get into the story, you can do all of like the storytelling techniques and stuff. But once you're in the framing device, then it's a more grounded sort of thing. But there are bits where when we're with Elton as he's talking into his camera, we do a crossfade to him looking kind of all pensive. And that seemed like a weird touch to me. Like, we do some things with the Elton in front of the camera stuff that I think is a bit too cinematic, or like it kind of pulls me out of that.
Yeah, it's a little over the top and serious from what I remember.
Fine with him taking a moment to like have just a quiet moment to himself.
Mhm.
But I don't know, the film choices seem strange to me.
When it comes to this era for me, so I don't know, maybe I just gotten used to this like jarring kind of things not clicking right.
Also, I have a question. I'm not sure how I feel about it. Like, to what degree are the events of this episode meant to be sort of like unreliable narrator type deal? Because there are certain things where it's just like, okay, this makes infinitely more sense if this is just Elton sort of like peppering in strange details because he's kind of a weird guy, or if he's just misremembering things.
Maybe it's just him describing events as he saw it, like with the Scooby-Doo door chasing with Dr. Rose and the alien monster at the beginning. Expect a bystander to see the thing happening.
Yeah. I'll make it very clear. Is this how he sees the world around him, or is this actually how the world is around him?
Yeah, because I want to assume that it's the first one, that we're seeing it through his lens. I'm not sure what this episode can do to really hammer that point in home without just going into complete farce territory, which you could argue it kind of does, but I don't know, it's strange. But another thing that sort of had that vibe to me, because I was going to bring up the Scooby-Doo doors, and also when he says the internet had a meltdown and he's like surfing the web and his computer literally explodes.
Because of the virus the Doctor has Mickey put online at the end of World War III.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The Doctor admits he's dangerous and he doesn't want anyone else keeping tabs on him.
I refuse to believe that Russell just doesn't know how the internet works.
For all we know, it could have been a Trojan horse virus that purposely gets your computer to destroy itself.
I think there's a problem when you establish a universe where it's so goofy. A lot of the times you don't know if it's supposed to be, this is imaginary, this is real. Farting aliens in one episode, I mean, part of the show, or is this just someone's imagination? And you can't really establish the two.
Yeah, well, we do one thing that makes me think that that's what this episode is leaning towards, which is at the end when he's having his like flashbacks, everybody hanging out and stuff. We hear them sing together, and they're pretty bad, but in his memory, they don't sound half bad. So that is an indicator, I think, of like this is being filtered more so than even through narration. It's like through Elton's lens. And there's also stuff like when Kennedy first shows up, he somehow gets the lights to turn off, and then...
Because he's an alien with a magic walking stick.
Yeah.
That's much the only explanation you need. It's like with science fiction shows, you need to have some flexibility with some of the theatrics these kind of shows tend to use.
Yeah, it's just such a strange moment to me. It's like, especially if you're someone watching that on a first viewing, how do you do that? It's just like, lights, like the lights turn on, it's like, is he talking to someone? Who are you talking to?
It was more clear with his intentions. Like, I'm gonna use like an example. There's this like episode of Supernatural where it's basically like the two brothers telling their point of view of the story, and you can immediately tell who is like telling the story because it's their personalities and you know how they see the world and stuff.
Something similar to that on the X-Files, but what the X-Files did there was that Mulder and Scully exemplified what they find frustrating about the other in their version of the story.
They do the same thing there, but another example, Ant-Man. When that one guy tells his story, his version of it and stuff, you can tell it's an over-dramatized version of someone else's viewpoint of their world. We don't really know Elton that much.
I get a better sense of his personality on this viewing than I did before. Like, you can tell he's kind of a strange... quirky guy, and like I totally believe that he would add in those odd flourishes into the story. Yeah, I'm coming around more on this the more I talk and think about it. I think my thing with this episode is just it's not for me. Like, I can point to things that I think even if I enjoyed most of it, I'd still have trouble with. But for the most part, I think it's just what this episode is trying to do. It does well, and it's just not my cup of tea. Like, the acting all around I found to be a bit too camp.
Same for me. It's just like, I can see why some people may like this one, but it's just not going to click with me at all.
And you can't really be so harsh on the design of the Soroloff since it was designed by a kid in a Doctor Who magazine contest. The winner would have had their design put in an episode.
Yeah, I feel bad for that kid.
Maybe that kid didn't use the internet at the time.
I heard the design was actually a little different from this. Apparently it was supposed to be really big.
Yeah, he's supposed to be like a giant, but I mean, come on.
You can't really pull that off on a Doctor Who budget at this point in the show. If it was the Moffat era, they would have had a bit more of a budget in order to make the giant monster thing work.
Since we're talking about the Absorbaloff, his whole reveal scene is where I feel like we take that extra step into too goofy. Ursula gets absorbed and keeps her glasses. We have this drawn out moment where she's like, now that I've been absorbed, I can read his thoughts. I know what he's going to do next. Elton, he's coming for you, run. It's like, duh. What else was he gonna do? Just let Elton leave? It's like real dramatic reveal right there. He's coming for you next, Elton.
Yeah, that whole scene's pretty bad. I mean, even before the reveal, you can see like his hands.
Yeah, that's a detail that I like. That's funny to me.
I
It's
thought
like
he's
he's literally
fine because I was under the impression this episode was a comedy one, so I just went with it.
Yeah, I mean, like, clearly it is. It's just, I think, even with this show, we're used to sort of like stories that have a more clear internal logic but have comedic overtones, as opposed to this, which is a straight up farce.
I don't know what it is about this episode, but something about it feels icky. I don't know why, towards the end. Maybe it's the design of the monster or something, but something feels off to me. It might just be me.
Well, I didn't feel icky about it, but like the entire sort of climax, third act, however you want to put it, of the episode, everything up from the Absorbaloff being revealed, pretty much up through the ending, I think. But mostly once the Doctor and Rose show, strange to me. Like, not strange the way the rest of the episode is strange, just like Elton is running for his life and he gets stopped by a fence that's like barely taller than him by a few inches.
And then
he's
the
just like, "I can't
TARDIS
go."
just happens to materialize right there, and then Rose has her stupid moment of the episode. A moment so stupid that Elton is like, "Really? Now?"
I'm so mad. I'm really mad at Rose. It's like, no one upsets my mom. It's like, shut up, Rose. Oh my god.
No one
And then,
upsets
like,
your mom more than you, Rose.
a couple of scenes later, she's being like really empathetic with him and like hugging
It's
him
like
and
complete 180 much. But
betraying.
then again, they did just watch him being forced to pretty much condemn his friends to death, so...
Yeah, God, that was supposed to be funny. That moment with Rose. Don't be mean to your mother.
Yeah, it's a complete lighter.
It ultimately depends on whether or not you like Rose or not, if that moment works, really. Watch every scene with Rose.
Yeah, I don't like Rose or Jackie, so that just kind of fails for me.
If anything in this episode works, the Jackie stuff works. I really like all the stuff with her in this episode.
It is comical, even though she is being a little bit, I have to say, a bit sexual harassment.
Yeah.
Purposely spilling wine on a dude's shirt just so she can see him shirtless.
They do try to make it okay because Elton is like, I'm going for it. But still, it's like she's really pushing herself on you, dude. Like, to the point of this is a little pervy.
It is sexual harassing, and on a comedy level, you can maybe make the argument that that's a bit weird and icky, but I'm thinking about it more on the level of just like, that really is how lonely she is. Like, I kind of regret skipping this episode prior to talking about Doomsday and the two-part finale, if for no other reason than it gives us some genuine insight to just how lonely Jackie is. Is like, her daughter's pretty much up and ditched her. Mickey's gone. She has no one. Ingratiate yourself with a joke and all that stuff. And Jackie does all the steps for him. It's like that scene because it's funny, but it's also that desperate for any kind of companionship. She's just gonna strike up a conversation with the first attractive stranger she meets because she literally has no one else. And then she finds out, oh, you were just using me to get to the doctor. You weren't even using me to get to my daughter. You were using me to get to my daughter's friend, who I know tangentially. I feel bad for Jackie. It's like she has no one. No one is interested in her, it doesn't seem. The one person who was forming a real connection with her, turns out that was based on a lie. This is a really sad episode from her perspective.
She just doesn't really have anybody or anything, so she just kind of forces herself on people almost. It's sad, I mean, thinking about it in that way. Even somebody that doesn't like Jackie, you can kind of understand, like, yeah, being lonely like that. Like, oh, someone show me some attention, now let me pour all myself into them, and I've seen that one.
Yeah. Both this episode and the next episode, I think, have the 10th Doctor out of character in completely different ways.
Yeah.
And I feel like these are some prime examples of like us not having that character down to a T just yet. Where in this episode, does it seem to anyone maybe kind of a weird, bad move? From what I gather, the Doctor just leaves a kid alone in a house with his dead mom?
Yeah, that was odd.
It was a traumatizing moment from Elton's childhood, so...
Yeah.
Maybe he just doesn't remember the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, some indication from like the doctor at least is like, I dropped you off at an orphanage.
We're not clear enough on that end. Damn it, Russell!
The whole sequence just feels a bit odd to me. Even the reveal, it's like, I mean, I understand some people will like push back traumatic memories and stuff, but I would think you'd be triggered before then to, especially looking for the doctor and everything, to remember what happened.
Kind of have it both ways, right? Because he is triggered by the sound of the TARDIS.
Mm-hmm.
And like he goes off to the other side of the room and Ursula comes up and is like, what's wrong? And he doesn't really say anything. So it's kind of ambiguous if he's remembering much, but then by the end of the episode, he's just like, the doctor explained it, and then the memories all came flooding back. So I don't know. I feel like I can buy into it, but at the same time, it kind of feels like we want his tragic backstory to be a mystery for mystery's sake.
Yeah, that's why I'm not like really for it. It just felt like, oh, we have to have a reveal here, like a twist. And like, this doesn't really feel like it worked. I'm still not buying completely that he didn't remember before this.
More clarification on what the doctor did in that moment. If I think about it a certain way, I can be fine with this, but instinctually, my reaction is, no, doctor, bad idea consigning a woman to life as a head on a slab of concrete.
Yeah.
Then again, the doctor is an alien and has proven multiple times he's an idiot.
He's also got enough empathy, I'd imagine. Like, this is the doctor. This is a guy who doesn't think life is worth living if you can't go out there and do your own thing. And he's gonna, quote-unquote, save this woman by making her live the rest of her life as a stationary object?
I also love that Elton just calls the Dr. Sonic screwdriver a magic wand, because ultimately, the Sonic screwdriver did become a magic wand up at that point in the show.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I don't see the doctor doing that, honestly. I mean, we could chalk it up to him being an idiot, but still, pretty silly. And they also indicate that she might not ever age or die, and she might be like that until the end of time.
Oh, and also, they have sexual...
And as she says, let's not go into that.
Oh no, we're going into that. Oh my god. They basically have a blowjob joke on Doctor Who.
How does that even physically work, considering that the back of her throat is just concrete?
That sounds painful now that you mention it.
It works because it works. And because this is a show that introduced a character like Captain Jack.
Fair point. I think this episode does what it's trying to do well. It's just not my cup of tea. Like, this kind of humor, this sort of like pantomime kind of acting approach, it's not my thing.
Same.
Plus, I guess this episode can be as a message to any future Doctor Who showrunner. Don't do an episode as a commentary about the fans, because it will always backfire.
You know, that is true. I didn't really think too much about the implications of this episode and what it's saying about fans. I don't know if it's really making any kind of statement.
I think it was well intended, but it kind of failed since everyone didn't like this episode much, if at all.
There's a few fans.
Not all the time, but I've made a point of, like, some of these episodes making a note of, will I go back to it, will I not? I don't think this is an episode I'll go back to, but I am glad it again, because I don't think it's nearly as straight up incompetent as I used to think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad to have a new perspective on it instead of... Yeah, because I used to be in the camp that's just like, what were they thinking? Like, this episode, it doesn't even work. No, I can clearly see what they were thinking. It does work. It's just, it doesn't work to a level that I personally come to this show for, that I personally appreciate. But, you know, it's fine. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the next episode.
Yeah. I was hoping we tried to keep things positive, but it doesn't look like it. Everybody meet us back over to our next episode. Fear Her.
Oh God, why?
Yeah.
Yeah.